because there is a law about protecting trade union activists, but it is only for the official unions which do not go on strike and which are not trade union activists, really, which are people just doing nothing. And of course, if they're doing nothing and you want to fire one of these people who do nothing, you cannot do that. And so every time when there is a new union being formed, the first thing which happens is that they try to, the bosses try to learn who are the troublemakers, and they fire them. And well, very often they get restored by the court, but in some cases they don't get restored, because the courts are also not really impartial, as you can imagine. The courts are usually on the side of the employers. So if you want to go on strike, what you have to do, you have to call the meeting of a labor collective. A labor collective involves everybody who is employed by the enterprise, including its boss, including sometimes even including the owner of the enterprise, if he's also the director or the top manager of the enterprise. And they have to be involved in the decision to make the strike. That's the law. And if you don't consult with them about how to organize a strike, your strike is illegal. And that's why there was not a single strike which was considered to be legal for 2 years, while there are lots and lots of strikes. Every time they go on strike, the boss goes to the court and gets a court decision that the strike is illegal. They have to stop. So the unions develop their own counter tactics. When they go on strike, then the boss brings in the court decision, and they stop the strike next morning. And in a few days, they restart the strike, which is illegal again. So the boss goes to the court, brings the paper, they stop the strike. In a few days, they restart the strike. In a way, it's even worse than a strike on a permanent basis, because it's disrupting the enterprise completely. Or they do Italian strikes, so-called Italian strikes, just pretending to work and not doing anything, which is a very Russian concept, actually. they enjoy it. No, but you know, well, it's like there was a strike of St. Petersburg post office. There was a strike of drivers of the post office. They said, our cars are broken, so no cars just deliver any post, because all cars suddenly happen to be broken. And of course, if you're a good technician, you always discover something's wrong with the car. You know, you just have to do a proper diagnosis. You know, just something, always something. There is something leaking, something dysfunctional. There's just not a single track which was able to move. You know. Okay, so speaking about democracy again. Electoral parties have nothing to do with democracy in Russia, because these are parties which are registered according to the current law, banning political activities, actually. Because only when you're apolitical you can be registered as a political party. If you're politically active, you are not entitled to run as a political party. That's how the law is structured. And it's very much like the law of strikes, because quite a lot of political activities automatically make it impossible for you to be legally involved in politics. For example, if you consider the elections unfair and you say that in public you're not allowed to participate in an election, it's catch-22. And every party has to stand in every single election, no matter what's happening. So if you abstain from elections, you're banned from elections. So you just can abstain from elections, say, for one councillor seat somewhere, and you're banned all over the country forever. So you have to take part in every single election, and the electoral law is a joke. You know, it's just a completely undemocratic electoral law. So if you just abstain from election on the ground that the electoral law is not fair, or the election is rigged, which happens every time, again, you're deregistered. Basically, also to get registered, you have to submit a list of 50,000 people with their names, their addresses, if you want to run an anti-system kind of political project, first of all, it's not so easy to have 50,000 people to get registered just to start. Where do you get these people from if you're not able to operate? Unless you already have these 50,000 people on the list. But also, can you imagine just admitting all these names and so on? So there are plenty of tricks, and in that sense, it's not a democracy. But on the other hand, when these people from the liberal opposition are speaking about despotism or even some kind of fascist regime, it's also not true. Because, you see, Russia is a very mixed case. Today at York, we already discussed it with another group. It's a very strange case because for a democracy, it looks like a joke. Because you have these funny political parties which don't represent anybody, with 80% of the population saying they do not believe and they do not take seriously any political party at all. I mean, just like that, you know. And people who are involved in political activity at the local level are not allowed to run for office, for example, because they don't belong to any political party and they cannot find a party to run for, and so on. So that's not a kind of democracy. But at the same time, if you imagine Russia as a kind of despotic dictatorship, it is not like that. It's not like that. People do not get jailed for political activities, for example. People do not get jailed for publishing newspapers or running internet sites and so on. So for a democracy, it's very undemocratic, but for a dictatorship, ironically, it's too free. This is one of the interesting aspects of Russian society today. And in a way, it's very good because, for example, we don't have the temptation of electoralism, for example. We don't have the temptation of parliamentary socialism, British style, you know? We don't have this temptation. We are not allowed to play this game, and probably it's very good that we are not allowed, you know? So we have to go through the actual movement on the ground. We have to mobilize for strikes, for specific protests, and so on. And so you're forced into this area of non-parliamentary opposition. And I think, in a way, it's very good. Speaking about specific movements which are not labor unions or political parties, well, environment, ecology. There are ecological groups. Unfortunately, however, most of the environmental projects like NGOs, which are very often funded from the outside, from abroad or from some other foundations, sometimes related to the state and so on. And well, I just had very serious kind of disappointment when there was just one environmental campaign, for example, in Ryazan, in which we were involved. And then there was some funding for the campaign, and then the funding stopped. And then the local environmentalists stopped campaigning, period. So what kind of movement is it when people are only campaigning as long as there are funds? So that was a very depressing story. And it doesn't mean that these people were not honest. They did think what they said. But when there is no funds, no way to do it, so just go do something else. Social movements are quite impressive when you see housing movement, education, the movement for free education. So there are social movements here and there. And they are exactly the ones who are involved in different protests happening daily, the protests to which I referred in the first part of my speech. Okay, speaking about national question. Well, okay, I think that after the collapse of the Soviet Union, the new left, this anti-Stalinist left, had to become somewhat more critical towards what can be called minority nationalisms.